We three kings of Orient are, bearing gifts we traverse afar. Field and fountain, moor and mountain, following yonder star. Well, of course, today is Epiphany, and on this day we hear again the story of the wise men from the east coming to travel to Jerusalem looking for a newborn king after they have observed his star at its rising. Now, often we picture the wise men in the stable with Mary and Joseph and the baby, don't we? But Scripture tells us that they entered the house where Jesus was. And by the timeline given, Jesus was likely a toddler when they arrived. Now, a mentor of mine a few years ago had told me about a tradition in his household when they put out the creche at the beginning of Advent in their home. So at first, they allowed the youngest child in the family to hide baby Jesus, risky, until there's a searching game on Christmas morning. But then also they put the Magi and the camels at the far end of the house. So then every day as they approached Christmas, the Magi would move just a little bit closer. And on Christmas morning, all the children would search for baby Jesus. The first to find him got to place him in the manger and open the first gift. But still, the Magi were not there. It wasn't until Epiphany, or Twelfth Night, when they finally arrived with gifts in hand. I have to tell you what stood out for me in this story, hearing it again this year, is that throughout the journey of these wise men, this long and arduous journey, they have a star to guide them. As the song suggests, "Oh, star of wonder, star of night, star with royal beauty bright, westward leading, still proceeding, guide us with thy perfect light." You see, at Christmas, we celebrate the coming of the light into the world, the light that shines in the darkness, and a light that no darkness can overcome. And the Magi follow that light in the darkness, that star. I mean, what a great lesson for us in our journey of life, to keep our eyes on the light that shines in the darkness. Because the truth is that even though the light of Christ has come, we know there is still darkness. While the winter is always dark, maybe this year feels a little bit darker than some years past. And of course, we don't particularly like the darkness, do we? As a friend of mine recently reflected, in all the major religions, darkness is interpreted as a negative thing. It's a symbol of evil or ignorance or grief, depression or fear, even death. I mean, we call difficult life experiences dark times. And we call them dark times because they're hard to go through. They cause suffering, or they bring out our shadow emotions, things like anger or fear or sadness. But the Magi teach us to follow the star, to follow the light that shines in the darkness. No matter how difficult or dark our lives feel, we have a light that has come to us and lives in us and guides us. That light is the reassurance of Christ's love and acceptance, and it gives us hope and healing and encouragement. Well, Barbara Brown Taylor recently wrote a book called Learning to Walk in the Dark. And in it she writes, "I have learned things in the dark that I could never have learned in the light." And God actually has a lot to teach us in the dark. Through darkness, we find courage. We understand the world in new ways. And we feel God's presence around us, guiding us through things seen and unseen. Often it is while we are in the dark that we grow the most. Well, Taylor encourages us to actually embrace the darkness. Instead of thinking only of the darkness of a tomb or a place of death, she would have us consider the darkness of the womb, a place of birth. We can look at the darkness in an unorthodox manner and find new life in it. Let's consider the circumstances of Jesus' birth as Matthew tells it. It's the stuff of dark times. King Herod, threatened by the prophecy of a Messiah, tries to manipulate the wise men to find this new king so he can kill him. Mary and Joseph then flee to Egypt to escape Herod. And the Magi, having been warned in a dream, go home by another road. But then, King Herod, having his plan thwarted, has all of the children aged 2 and under in and around Bethlehem killed. It's called the slaughter of innocents, a part of the story we don't read in our lectionary. And it's quite a troubling Christmas story, isn't it? Not something that we see on our Christmas cards. But perhaps, as one commentator suggests, it resonates with a similar darkness that our world is experiencing. We too have families on the run from their land for fear of their lives. We too have innocents being slaughtered, whether by violence or by treatable diseases or preventable starvation. We too seem to see a plethora of leaders who are terrified by the prospect of losing their power. And they seem willing to do almost anything to hold on to it. We too see well-intentioned people manipulated by individuals or corporations and governments, being via social media or countless other ways that teach us to view the world in a distorted way. And we too see some people who have become wise to stand firm in their resistance. So while this isn't really the Christmas story that we prefer, it may feel like a more realistic account of events. And into the midst of these dark times, that light has come. Jesus has come. He comes in love and in mercy, and he comes to save. He comes for all, not just the Israelites, but for the Gentiles and for foreigners too. And let's also recognize God's consistent action on the side of the oppressed and to save those who are in need. Let's recognize that God works through the Magi, warns in dreams, that God helps the family take flight and provide shelter and sanctuary in Egypt. Very little of this is what the various characters in the story would have hoped for or planned. Yet none of it is devoid of God's presence or God's promise of new life. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness will not overcome it. In the dark times of life, I believe if we follow that star as the wise men did, that God will guide us with its perfect light. And we will see signs of new life in our world too. We'll see it in little ways, Like a story I had heard earlier this year of a woman who collapsed at a gate in the LAX airport. She burst into tears because her toddler was running around yelling through all of the seats and refusing to get on the plane, and she just didn't know what she would do. And about 6 or 7 strangers, other women around the terminal, convened around the mom, and they made a circle around her and her child. And using gentle ways, they calmed them down and helped them in their time of need. We also see new life in big ways, like the Women's Wall in India a few days ago. Somewhere between 3.5 and 5 million women lined up along the National Highway 66, creating a line 385 miles long. The demonstration was meant to bring awareness to gender inequality in their country. But as one of the participants noted, even as the women of all ages lined up along one side of the highway, there on the other side were men, husbands, friends, relatives, standing there to show their support. What a beautiful sight. In the dark womb of uncertain times, the light shines, and the darkness cannot overcome it. As the light shined for those wise men long ago, it shines for us now. Whether you are in field or fountain, moor or mountain, keep following that yonder star, that star of wonder, and let it guide you with its perfect light. Amen.